Thank you for staying with us. The Attorney General and Minister of Justice Lateef Fagbemi, SAN, has announced plans for a comprehensive review of Nigeria's laws, which is touted as the most extensive in the country's history. Speaking at Afe Babalola University's convocation ceremony, Fagbemi revealed that President Bola Tinubu has expressed concerns about outdated laws, emphasizing the need for legislation that addresses Nigeria's daily needs. To achieve this goal, Fagbemi will assemble a team of legal experts. The review aims to create laws that tackle Nigeria's current challenges. Well, joining us in the studio for this conversation is a lawyer and public affairs analyst, Fred Nzako. Fred, good morning.
Good morning.
It's good to have you join us.
Thank you. Glad to be with you. Good morning to our dear viewers.
Right. Now, this issue of constitutional amendment or addressing the issues, because there are those who say that the current constitution is not delivering as it should, and so perhaps this is why we're looking at addressing some of these bottlenecks. But we must understand what the challenges really are for us to see that we are addressing them. From your perspective, what really are the bottlenecks when it comes to this constitution and it delivering on what it should?
Yes, thank you. It's a good one. It's a right step in the right direction if it will be carried through. But like you said, it is important to understand what the challenges are. If you don't know what the challenges are, you will not be able to solve them. Otherwise, you could be going around in a cycle without achieving any meaningful results. What are the challenges? The challenges are those things that affect, one, the unity of the country, two, the security of lives and properties, three, the productivity, economic productivity of our country. Because the economic productivity goes to issues about income, wages, welfare of the citizens, enjoyment of life, and then patriotism. At the end of the day, the whole thing tappers on patriotism. So this amendment will not be simple. It will not be simple. It will be very, very holistic. Now, the issue now is, who has the legitimate authority to make such amendment? Because one can easily say that it's the responsibility of National Assembly and in partnership or in concurrence with the state houses of assembly to amend whatever that is not right in our constitution. But the executive, I want to say this emphatically, that the executive has the right and the authority to engineer such process. And I believe that is what Mr. President wants to do at the federal level. So that it could be an executive, it will come by way of an executive bill to the National Assembly, then, or it will be a way of, okay, there's a team coming from executive, there's already a Constitutional Amendment Committee. It has become almost like a standing committee of the National Assembly, usually headed by the Deputy Speaker. I mean, all the assemblies have, Deputy Senate President, and then assisted by the Deputy Speaker of the House of Reps. And all the assemblies from the Third Assembly have been involved in lawmaking process of amending our Constitution. But it has never been holistic. There was a conference of 2014, which everybody believed that such holistic amendment will come by way of a national conference. We had series and series of national conferences. And I am one of I belong to the school of thought that says, let us go back to all the conferences that we had in the past. There's no need reinventing the wheel. Then look at all their communiques and all the resolutions and the conclusions arrived at by those conferences and take out all the salient points that will help us in this constitutional amendment. If this committee will go that route, it will be very fine. Because
but
that will
still be relevant.
Of course. The issues are still there. The issues are still there. Essentially hovering around restructuring, always hovering around restructuring, hovering around our engagement as a nation, hovering around the level of patriotism in our country, hovering around the issues of productivity and the deployment of our resources. How much and how well have we deployed our naturally given resources to the growth and development of the country? And it is a failure of all these that has led to the strife that we have today. If there is massive insecurity in the land, what are the causes of that insecurity? And of course, we know the tendencies, and we also know the repercussions, but the causes are deep-rooted. Those deep-rooted problems need to be uprooted and then solved. I want to hope that this committee will be very thorough, very deep-rooted to be able to solve all these problems, because there are many.
When you're talking about deep-rooted, I am interested, especially when you talk about the matter of unity and also the matter of security. Recall that even the president had once spoken about the matter of state policing that some people have touted will be the solution to our security issues. But would that also be a way or an approach of addressing this issue from the root? So just talk to us when you talk about
Yes, absolutely. When we talk about some of these problems, you ask yourself, how do we even elect our leaders? The election management body, who appoints them? How do we detach politics from governance? Because one thing is politics, another is governance. But what we see in our climb is that there's so much politics and very little governance. You just finished with Charles, and we're talking about 2007, and you were asking, I was asking, is it not too early to begin to talk about 2027? Sorry, 2027. And then I tell you that politicians will tell you that the best time to start planning for the next election is immediately after the
end of one.
So that tells you that there's so much politicking and less governance. How do we turn the table? There is so much wastages in terms of cost of governance. How do we turn the table? Why would we be spending 70-75% of our resources in recurrent expenses when the capital projects are there yearning for attention? We see technology all around the world. How do we imbibe that technology? How do you encourage the man in Aba to work well and then nationalize his output? How do you ensure that there is unity in the land so that there will be justice, fairness, and equity? Because these are bastions of development. These are bastions of human civilization and democracy. How do we ensure that what you utilize what you have, where you have comparative advantage, and then bring the rest to the center? Any talk in all this committee and an amendment that does not take care of all these issues will, at best, be mere jamboree. At best, be mere jamboree. And that's why we said, some people argue that 1999 Constitution is a false document.
Yes.
That from its inception, it has told lies. That it was a military creation. Yes. We have been managing with it, and there are so many loopholes. How do you plug all these loopholes? Now, the critical question again will be, can executive do this? Can the National Assembly tolerate or accept this? Let's take, for example, we look at our system and we say, we don't want bicameral legislature. You have to have Senate and have House of Reps. We need to shrink the cost of governance. Would the National Assembly agree that, one arm will be obliterated? Some countries did it. Senegal did it. One other country in Africa did it. It's not a rocket science. When you look at your issues critically, you now know whether you are going to run on that track or not. Some will argue, that it has to be fully representative of the people. Meanwhile, what goes on in the Senate is the same thing that goes on in the House of Reps. At the end of the day, they come together for harmonization before it moves to the president for accent. Why wouldn't all the civil society organizations and professional groups be the other arm that will bring in their input? Why would it be a full-time job? Why not make it a part-time job? So that people who are interested in national development and not only in politics for self-aggrandizement will get involved. These are all the issues. So it is not a primary school thing. No. It is a tertiary school affair that the government is going into. So we want to believe that the government would be very honest with it. Why would we even be talking about, in an economy that is struggling, why do we have 50 ministers as of today? Is there no way there could be a ceiling? There's no ceiling, but there's a minima. No maximum, but we have minima. What is the minima? That every state in the country must produce one minister. But there's no maximum. And that's why the current president has made them 50. Now, why would the oil resources in the Niger Delta be exploited and half stolen in collusion with international thieves, oil thieves, and we are as if it doesn't matter. Why would the gold and all the solid minerals in Zamfara be stolen while the state becomes the poorest state in the country? These are all issues. And then you cannot solve those issues without going to touch these crux of the matter. And that is the cause of the matter is anchored on restructuring, anchored on true fiscal federalism.
So you also try to balance it by saying there are interests that what also need to be that we also need to tackle. But where again will you place the challenge of enforcement when we get, if and when we get to that point, restructuring and all the ideals that Nigerians are clamoring for, there is still that big elephant of enforcing these rules to the letter. That remains a key challenge.
Yes, I want to agree with you that the issue of enforcement, and when you say enforcement, I suppose that you mean support by essentially the organs of government that should give their support. And that was why I mentioned the National Assembly. Because we operate, you cannot suspend the Constitution. It's only a sovereign national conference that can suspend the Constitution, and then the issues will now take over. The communique will now take over the Constitution. And it's only even the military dictatorship that can suspend the Constitution, and they will still be valid. We are not talking about military dictatorship, even though a benevolent dictatorship would serve Nigeria well and then ensure that this your fear about implementation will be solved. But that benevolent dictatorship, because we are human beings, you don't know who that will be. So we no longer talk about issue of military. We are not talking about the will, the power, the citizens' power to do what is right. That is what we should be talking about. Now, if this committee comes out, and assuming they recommend unicameral legislature, do you think National Assembly will work with them? That's the issue. But if a country wants to survive and move forward, we must subsume our all personal, individual idiosyncrasies and interests and work for the good of all. And how do we mean? The current National Assembly, for example, or even the subsequent one, depending on whatever this is brought to them, if they look at the bigger picture and said, assuming we want it to take immediate effect, and say by 2027, we may not have the Senate, for example, but we need to maybe enlarge the number of House of Reps so that there will be further representation. We need to do this, we need to do that. The question now is, those who are already angling to return back to the Senate, would they agree? It now becomes a coup against, they will see it as a coup against the Constitution, and they will shoot it down. And in shooting it down, they will seem to be right. So that is where the challenge lies. Will Nigerians accept what does not further their interests? Personal interest, or not collective interest. When we talk about state police, for example, how many of them are in support of the state police? You'll be surprised to see that a lot of people, I have interacted with so many policemen, and they are telling me that state police is not the way to go. I was surprised. Why do they say so? Because of selfish interest, not because it hurts the collectivity. And then some people will say, oh, somebody who wants to run for governorship, maybe in the next election, will tell you, don't talk about state police, so the governor will use it against everybody. Does state policing start and end with election or with the electoral process? No. Security of life and properties of the people, all people should be the paramount interest and not the personal interest of one or the other. So these are the challenges that we have. But with drive of goodwill, this regime can achieve that. Why? Because there are a majority in the National Assembly, they have the majority in the state assemblies. So this can pass through if there is meaningful, selfless approach. But if it is aimed at returning those in power in 2027, those who want to take their seat will not agree.
That's the issue. The bigger picture it's the major issue right now. And you have talked about suspicion and the matter of trust. It's a huge elephant in the room.
Absolutely.
That has to be addressed. You've talked about the people also feeling like this is in our best interest. Yes. I mean, how do we, address all of these issues? Because from what you are saying, if this matter of suspicion and all of it is not addressed, then we are not similarly ready From your perspective?
Let us see the template. The template will give us a sense of direction where the government wants to take us. Because people will tell you, analysts will tell you that when a politician tells you good morning, look at your watch a second time to ensure that it is still morning. There could be some hidden agenda that you may not know or see. But when the template comes out, that is when people will now begin to judge the intention of government in all of this. If the intention is right, I believe that people will buy into it. It's not going to be easy, but I tell you that one step after another, we will achieve it. Supreme Court has given a judgment for liberation of the local government system, but it is still being undermined through the political approach. And that was why I talked about issue of selection of leadership. Who appoints the state independent electoral commissioners? Who appoints the National Independent Electoral Commission? That is the crux of the matter. In America, for example, do you know that the commissioner of police of a state and even of a county is by election? They elect, yes. By plebiscite, people go to vote. We want this man to be our police chief by election. So we have said that the process of selection or election of leaders is key to development of this country, very strongly for development of this country. And that's why we are talking about Ways Committee and then report and all that. That the man who is interested in that election should not be the one to appoint the election management body. It is natural. We now said, let the judiciary that will be an umpire at the end of the day, that is not interested, not partisan and the rest, be the ones to look into that. But is there anything wrong with even allowing organizations, civil society organizations, professional groups, and organized groups to have their own input into the decision of who becomes the chairman of INEC and national commissioners and the rest of them? You start from there. It's only when you start from there that people will begin to have confidence that, oh, nothing is untoward about this arrangement. Who and who are enjoying the resources of Nigeria against the interests of the rest of us? Who and who? How are things done? Because the whole essence of national economics is allocation of resources. How are the resources being allocated? How can, at all times, always, the leadership of NNPC is always from one section of the country? Funny enough, a section that does not have even a barrel of crude. When last did you see the leadership of NNPC from that section where the oil is obtained? So these are all issues. Have you ever seen the Ministry of Water Resources working in the South? Have you? These are all issues. So essentially, any committee that does not look deep into the issue of restructuring, that word restructuring, I don't know why it is stinging or slapping the ears of some people, but you cannot help using it. Because once a structure is not working well, you restructure it. Absolutely, our system is not working well. So if you don't like the word restructure, call it any other thing, but let us rejig the system and make it to work well. Because the way we are today, we are not making progress. And when we talk about it, people will begin to say, oh, it's Mr. President. It's not Mr. President. I have sat on this table to tell you that Nigeria decays by the decade. The day I was saying that whoever that will come after Obasanjo will inherit more problems, they said I didn't know what I was talking about. I said whoever that will come after Jonathan will have more problems. They said I didn't know. When Buhari came, he said PDP has spoiled Nigeria for 16 years. He had 8 years. What happened? Tinubu came in and said, whoo, Buhari has killed Nigeria. Whoever that will come after Tinubu with this current structure will be worse. Nigerians will continue to have incremental problems in geometric proportion because the population is increasing, but resources are not. It's a challenge. It's a demographic challenge. It's a natural economic challenge. You have more mouths to feed. You have more infrastructure to build. The more the population increases, the more the decay in existing infrastructure, and the more the need for building new ones and the repairing old ones. Where are the resources? Resources keep drying up. Now, insecurity has added to our problem. Right. And part of it is climate change. It is not only climate change. It is failure to restructure this country that is the major problem.
And when you talk about restructuring, let's also look at the kind of restructuring that the judiciary needs, because apparently when you look at it, it seems like the judiciary is there to clean up, the mess of the rest of the country, but it also has its own challenges. Look at the docket. You spoke about the Supreme Court. The dockets are full, judges are overwhelmed, and there's this talk about decentralizing the Supreme Courts and the appellate courts, for example. Now, what kind of restructuring do you want to see in the judiciary?
We have 6 geopolitical zones. We can have 6 Supreme Courts in Nigeria and 1 in Abuja. Yes. We have 6 geopolitical zones. We can have 6 administrative centers and not 36. We can shrink our administrative costs. It is working. Nobody has had anything against the 6 zonal structure. What is left for us to do is to make it administrative and make it constitutional. Now they are looking at the Constitution. Let them begin to think about, instead of 36 states, where we say many of the states cannot take care of themselves. We have 6 administrative centers. Call them 6 governors. Call them 6 premiers. Call them 6 whatever, anything you like. Prime ministers of each zone, any name. Issue of nomenclature is not a problem, but issue of the structure. Such that each zone, there's no zone in Nigeria that does not have ample resources to stand well, both in terms of human and material. There's none. So it's just because human beings, everybody wants to have a chiefdom of his own. Everybody wants to be a governor. Everybody wants to be a president. But not everybody can be at the same time. If we reduce it to 6, when we talk about the good old days of the regional government, it was so because the cost of governance was low. They were able to do a lot, unlike what we have today. People now begin to criticize civilian administration and say we had more capital projects under the military than under the civilian, simply because the structure was unitary and they had a lot of money to do capital projects.
Right.
So for us to be able to do something, we need to shrink our cost of governance by shrinking the number of states and shrinking everything that we have and ensuring that we run on that track, on that trajectory of growth and development. Do whatever you do at your zone and bring the one you have to bring to the center.
All right. We'll have to leave the conversation here now. We must thank you, lawyer and public affairs analyst, Fred Nzako, for your time on the program.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.